What is the relationship like between our President Trump and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu? There are rumors that the relationship is not as warm as it used to be.
We're dancing together. It's a tango. And sometimes when you're dancing together, you might step on each other's toes. We have a war going on in Gaza. We have issues regarding Syria, Lebanon, regarding Iran.
People are accusing Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu for prolonging the war against the Gazans.
These accusations call our prime minister a war criminal? That's insane.
Do you think it's possible that Saudi Arabia would consider joining the Abraham Accords sooner rather than later?
Well, we know they're considering it because in 2019, we weren't very far away.
Do you think it's possible that President Trump is making an offer to Qatar that they can't refuse?
I think that may very well be his strategy.
Does Israel still need foreign aid from America? Ambassador Leiter, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I can't imagine what a roller coaster it must be for you to be an ambassador from Israel to the United States during these absolutely crazy times.
Thank you so much for having me, Marissa. It's good to be with you on PragerU. It's a roller coaster indeed, but the key is to stay buckled up. So I buckle up every morning and face the twists and turns of the Washington roller coaster.
I want to just start by offering my condolences. I know you lost a son after October 7th in the war, and, you know, we use the word roller coaster and smile, but I also don't take it lightly what you and your country are going through right now and have been going through. And so, you know, many of us have been praying for you and have been walking around with a heavy heart, seeing what has been happening and, frankly, in the Middle East. And so I just want to just start by saying that, you know, we're really sad to hear that what you went through. Losing a son must be absolutely devastating.
Well, thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your concern. Thank you for your heart. Moshe was my oldest son. He was 39, a father of 6. He had spent 15 years in an elite special forces in the Air Force. And then he went to med school at the age of 33. And he was supposed to start his rounds in the hospital on October 8th. So we all entered Plan B when the war broke out, and he led the forces of Division 551 into Gaza. He fought for the first 15 days. And on the 15th day, on a Friday at 3:21 in the afternoon, he walked into an ambush of Hamas in a building next to a mosque, which had a shaft to a tunnel where they were holding hostages and missiles that were firing into our cities. His assignment was to find the shaft. He found it, found the tunnel. He announced on the radio, "We found the shaft." And then he said, "Shabbat Shalom," a Sabbath of peace. That's when they set off the explosion. Those were his last words, peace. The very last word that came out of his mouth was peace. And we hope that at the end of this process, it's a long process, but what we've been looking for about 3,700 years is a Sabbath of humanity, a peace of humanity. And I think that my son was in that battle. I think he was leading the forces that are pursuing real peace. So I find some consolation in knowing that his life was full of meaning and that he was fighting for meaning. But I guess we're going to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll talk about that and, you know, the amazing resilience that Israelis have had throughout this entire experience, as you describe. I mean, you have war, and then here we're sitting probably just about a week since your country, Israel, won the Eurovision second place, right? And so I guess congratulations on that. It was Yuval Raphael won your Eurovision, and so I guess you have a lot of these ups and downs, and just it's incredible how a country the size of New Jersey gets so much attention from around the world. There's something supernatural about that.
Well, I think we are a nation of miracles. The miracles go on. You talk about resilience. Very often it's said that Israel mistakenly came into being because of the Holocaust. Israel came into being despite the Holocaust, not because of the Holocaust. Any other nation would have collapsed after such a calamity. But the Jewish people from the time, really, of Abraham are a people that show resilience. We left Egypt just to stand at Sinai and get the Ten Commandments and be teaching the Ten Commandments now for 3 millennia. So we're a people that survived 2,000 years of exile. We came back to our homeland. We are indigenous to the land of Israel. We didn't give up on the promise of return. That's resilience. And even today, if we're talking about miracles, when I came to Israel in 1978, there was a little gizmo on my shower which turned off the water after 90 seconds because we were a country without water. Today, we're a net water exporter. We're exporting water to Jordan, to help them confront their water crisis. 87% of our industrial water is wastewater that's reprocessed. The miracles go on. I'll tell you the biggest miracle, Marissa. We were talking before about children. We're the only developed country in the world with replacement fertility. You've got 36 countries in the OECD. Not one has replacement fertility. So Israel is not only a resilient country in the past, we are providing the world with direction and resilience for the future, because without children, there's no future.
Yeah, we definitely have a problem, especially in the West, with people not having children. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that and why is it that Israel is still a happy place despite the war and is still...
we always come in the top 10 in the happiness index.
I know, right? It is pretty amazing. But I want to get into a little bit of politics because these have been, as I mentioned, really crazy times. And so much uncertainty, and frankly, really hard to understand what is going on. And
we have to talk about politics.
We have to talk. I want to talk about John Locke, and I know that you're a biblical scholar. And for those who love this kind of stuff, stay tuned till the end. But let's get into the stuff that really has been weighing on people's minds. And my first question is the relationship between the United States and Israel. This is something that people have been asking many questions about, especially recently. What is the relationship like between our President Trump and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu? There are rumors that the relationship is not as warm as it used to be. What's your answer to that?
Don't listen to rumors. They're not right. We have a very warm relationship. The relationship is very cordial on a government-to-government basis and on a personal level between the president and the prime minister. I've been together with both of them now for 2 visits, extensive visits. And there's a tremendous mutual respect despite the different personalities. I mean, they're very different people, but there's tremendous respect between the two of them. And on a day-to-day basis, I'm in touch with the White House pretty much during a period of crisis. I mean, we have a war going on in Gaza. We have issues regarding Syria, Lebanon, regarding Iran, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit. There's an awful lot that we have to discuss, probably more than any other situation, barring, let's say, Ukraine, Russia. And we're dancing together. It's a tango. And sometimes when you're dancing together, you might step on each other's toes. So here and there are issues, and that's good, and that's okay. But it's a very healthy relationship. It's a brotherly relationship. We're the little brother. The United States is the big brother. And there's some tension sometimes, but we get along really well. And we have common interests and common values. So I wouldn't listen to those rumors.
And how are your relationships with the rest of the Trump administration? Do you feel that Israel is welcomed? Is it a warm relationship?
It's a very warm relationship, and we're able to talk about everything. I'll give you one example. When I came at the end of January, just as the administration came in, we learned that the previous administration, without a directive from the president, I'll be fair, but the bureaucrats in the system were slow-walking munitions that had already been purchased by Israel. And we were in desperate need. I mean, we were under embargo from many European countries, and the last thing we needed was to be under embargo from the United States. And it wasn't an official top-down embargo, but in fact, it was a very serious situation because the bureaucrats were holding it up. They got the spirit of things was all we wanted to talk about was humanitarian aid to Gaza, nothing else. Mm-hmm. So munitions were being held up. It was very serious. The president gave an immediate directive to free everything up. And everything really stems from that first period of time with the administration where things just fell into place. So, for example, the administration is very much in tandem with us in fighting this international effort to demonize and delegitimize the state of Israel. To unilaterally recognize Palestinian statehood, We're in lockstep, really, with the administration on these issues, and it's very, very important to us. I think it's of critical importance to the United States and the West as a whole as well.
What are your views of the current relationship that President Trump is building with Saudi Arabia? Do you think it's possible that Saudi Arabia would consider joining the Abraham Accords sooner rather than later?
Well, we know they're considering it because in 2019, we weren't very far away. I think if President Trump had remained in office, we probably would have reached that point of a complete normalization with Saudi Arabia. There have been some complications in the meantime. It's a little difficult right now as the war continues. I think Saudi Arabia is also looking to see what the end game with Iran will be. That's very, very important to them. So I think we're marching towards normalization with Saudi Arabia. I can tell you I spent a lot of time in the Gulf, particularly in Abu Dhabi prior to the war. Think tank business, meeting with intellectuals from Saudi Arabia. They want it. The young generation is very, very intent on moving forward. A lot of vested interests because we have to understand the bigger picture. And excuse me if this becomes a long-winded answer, but it's very important.
I'm sure people want to understand.
Professor Bernard Lewis, who was the doyen of experts in the Middle East and of Islam, he would always mention that Islam has not undergone a reformation. Okay, so Islam came into being 600 years after Jesus, and the Reformation came after about 1,500 years. So we're now at a period of time where Islam is ripe for reformation. And the tensions we find between moderates and extremists in the Muslim world is really an argument over reformation. So the moderates want to accommodate the West. They want to accommodate modernity. The extremists want to go back into a fundamentalist mode. The argument between them, the apex of that argument, is basically revealed through the relationship to Israel, because Israel is this Western transplant in their world, right? So you have the Judeo-Christian civilization in the Middle East within the Islamic world. And now the attitude of Islam is, do we accommodate this Judeo-Christian transplant or not? So the moderates say yes. We want reform within Islam to accommodate this. The fundamentalists say no. So Saudi Arabia under MBS is moving in that direction of moderation, wants to accommodate the West, and therefore you need to normalize relations with Israel. So I think that overall, if we support these efforts, we're going to move in that direction, and we're going to move into a whole new era. I think, though, that perhaps before we actually reach an Abraham Accord accommodation with Saudi Arabia, there may be others first. I mean, there's no reason now why we wouldn't be moving into accommodation with Syria and Lebanon. I mean, we have dramatically changed the paradigm there. I mean, Hezbollah has been diminished because of the visionary activity of our government under Netanyahu. I mean, there was the decision taken to take out Nasrallah, to diminish Hezbollah dramatically, and we now have the opportunity for Lebanon to emerge from its failed state status and reassert itself as a civil society. So they're moving in that direction. And Syria now, I think we would have been a little bit more hesitant about removing sanctions immediately from
That's
Giuliani.
exactly what I wanted to ask you. How do you feel about President Trump removing sanctions from Syria?
We're urging caution. I think the direction is right, but there's not a long history of jihadis becoming Jeffersonians, right? So we'd like to see some time given to Giuliani. Prove your rhetoric. It's good rhetoric. I mean, we like, there's importance to words, but let's see actions. So let's see the protection of the minorities, for example. We have 550,000 Druze living right over our border, and Druze are loyal citizens of the state of Israel. They have their cousins right there. We can't,
And they've been massacred in Syria.
There have been a massacre recently of 73 Druze. The Alawites are not allies of Israel, but they had about 1,000 of their own massacred recently. We just don't want to see minorities massacred across our border. We can't just sit by and allow that to happen. We also can't allow jihadis to be on our border. We learned from October 7th. Muslim Brotherhood-oriented Islamists cannot be on our border because that's going to be a lethal threat to our citizens. So we have interests in Syria, and we'd like to see Giuliani move in that direction, where he's disbanding the jihadi groups, he's outlawing terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah and whatnot, and he's protecting the minorities. So if sanctions are removed in stages and it's performance-based, as, by the way, it's in Lebanon. The ceasefire we have in Lebanon is a performance-based ceasefire. So to the degree that General Aoun, the president of Lebanon, disarms Hezbollah, to that degree we're moving towards accommodation and peace. We removed our troops. We have 5 installations on the border. We'll remove them too, as soon as we're convinced that Hezbollah is not moving back. So it's performance-based. We're moving in the right direction. Lebanon, the majority of the Lebanese are ready to come into accommodation with us immediately, but they're not going to do it without Syria because of the proximity and the history there. So we need to move in that direction. I'm very upbeat about the potential for an Abraham Accord with Syria and Lebanon, and that may actually precede Saudi Arabia. It'll be done with a wink from Saudi Arabia, okay? Just as the UAE and Bahrain needed that wink and the nod from the big brother in Riyadh. But they got it, and we have that normalization. And the amazing thing about the Abraham Accords is that it has sustained a year and a half of war in Gaza and our confrontation with the Hezbollah. You know, when I was in Abu Dhabi with extensive meetings, I sat there for months with thinkers from Saudi Arabia and elsewhere, I felt more comfortable with the keep on my head than I do in many American cities. I hate to say it, but it was tremendously accommodating in that regard. So we can pursue that avenue of accommodation, moderation, and peace.
Well, and it's become incredibly profitable for countries that have joined the Abraham Accords. And so that's probably why you felt safe as a Jew there, because they realize that ultimately they love providing a wealthy and profitable economy for their people more than they hate the Jews.
Yes, but I think that the economy is one manifestation of that. I think there's a fundamental belief that Islam has to be moderated to accommodate Western civilization.
So how do you feel about Qatar and the president being in Qatar and normalizing relations with them, given that the Qataris are very likely behind Hamas?
Yeah, I'm a lot more uncomfortable with Qatar than really anybody else. I said, I think it was my first interview after arriving in Washington, that Qatar is supporting the arsonists and the fire department, right? And you know, that's duplicitous behavior, and you can't really be doing that. So on the one hand, we have Qatar moderating the issue with the hostages. You know, they're hosting the talks, and they're putting pressure sometimes on the Hamas to release the hostages. But at the same time, we have to understand the power of ideas. And I think we lose that very often, that behind practical policy, there are ideas. And Qatar belongs to the ideas of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood believes in a caliphate. They believe in running the world. They believe in putting down Western society and Western civilization. So they've accommodated moderation because of economic interests alone, not ideational. So that's dangerous, okay? They're accommodating the West because they can influence using their money, and they're doing it. They're doing it, you know, broad scale. We see the reports that recently came out, $5 billion into the education system in the United States. This is not good, okay? They are intent on undermining the values that have built the United States of America, the Judeo-Christian values upon which this country is based. They're not a positive player, and it's unfortunate to see thinkers, publicists, journalists in certain areas of the public discussion here supporting Qatar and saying that they're actually allies of the West. They're not. They have an agenda. It's not a pro-Western agenda. And I think we got to call them out on that. If they want to do good stuff, you know, more power to you. Move into that orbit. But I think we've got to be much more careful about the relationship with Qatar and the activities that they're involved with here and in the West in general.
What do you think we need to see as Americans and as the West from Qatar that would prove that they are viable partners? Is
Well,
there anything?
I don't want to give advice to America. I'd like to talk about the values they represent, and there has to be a distancing from the Muslim Brotherhood approach. I mean, this is, what do you say to a Soviet Union? You say to the Soviet Union, abandon communism, right? What do you say to China? You say you have to change your ideas in order for us to be able to really accommodate each other. So you have to say to Qatar, are you Muslim Brotherhood? I mean, why are you hosting Hamas? You're hosting Hamas because you're of the same mind. Hamas leadership is there, and by the way, unfortunately, most unfortunately, in Turkey as well. Hamas leadership is sitting in Qatar and in a NATO country, in Turkey. I mean, why aren't we saying to our NATO ally, you can't host a terrorist organization? That's not right. That's immoral, and we shouldn't be tolerating that.
Do you think it's possible that President Trump is making an offer to Qatar that they can't refuse? Because President Trump negotiates like a businessman and basically says, listen, this is the best offer you will ever get. You should change your ways and take this offer or else. And the or else gives them an opportunity to either take it or leave it. And if they leave it, then you've offered them everything possible in order to make the deal, because the alternative might be that the Muslim world goes with China. And if China and the Muslim world gang up against the United States and the West, then we're in real big trouble.
So now we're moving from the ideational plane to the practical political plane. And I think when it comes to practical politics, I have a great deal of faith in President Trump. I think that may very well be his strategy. I think that when it comes to practically applied politics, he'll hold their feet to the fire on serious issues. And he has a very unique way of negotiating. And I've called this, his endgame, I think, might be, instead of MAD, mutually assured destruction, MAC, mutually assured construction. I want to move, I think he's saying, to the Qataris and really to everyone. I want to move in a direction which is going to be mutually beneficial to everyone. But at the end of the day, within that mutually assured construction, there are certain things that you have to adhere to, or you have to admit to, you have to live with us under certain conditions. And I think that at some point, look, his Justice Department is going after these universities who have taken Qatari money and have sponsored anti-Semitism on campus. So, yes, he's saying Qatar...
And by the way, anti-Americanism on campus.
Anti-Americanism, no question about it. We can talk about that at length, actually. But the point is that when he's engaging them, I think he may be actually increasing the leverage he has over their use of funding here in the United States. I think that's coming because it's very clear to me that the approach of the Justice Department right now is and the State Department under Marco Rubio is no nonsense about this business of foreign influence on our educational system here in the United States. So I'm very upbeat and encouraged and optimistic about the approach that the United States is going to ultimately foster change with Qatar's agenda.
You talked a little bit about Turkey, but maybe we can go into it a little deeper, because once upon a time, I remember flying to Israel through Turkey and seeing a lot of Israelis in Turkey. And so over the past few years, things have changed dramatically over there. Can you describe what has happened?
It's so unfortunate. I mean, extremism comes into politics and really destroys everything. We used to have 200, 300,000 people from Israel visit Turkey every year. Tourism was booming. Turkey has great companies. We'd love to see these big conglomerates come in and bid on infrastructure projects. Certainly instead of China, right? So we'd love to have Turkey. They're a neighbor, very strong civic life, a wonderful history, a very impressive history. They're a country with a civilization, very impressive. But we have a president in Turkey who calls our prime minister Hitler a few times a day. That's unacceptable. We have a president in Turkey who talks about an Ottoman Empire that's, stretching all the way to Jerusalem and Mecca. By the way, the Saudis are no less concerned about the Turks than we are. So If we can somehow find a way where Turkey goes back to its pre-Erdogan era of moderation, of being a real NATO ally, and a force for peace in the Middle East, then we can go back to an economic boom between our countries, and back to tourism and a moderating influence way beyond Turkey's borders.
What do you think is the ideology that is holding Turkey back?
Well, once again, Marissa, we go back to the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan is an advocate of the Muslim Brotherhood. I would encourage people to read up on the Muslim Brotherhood to understand its ideology, the same way we had to understand, what communism was under the Soviet Union. This is an all-embracing ism which intends on taking over the globe. And this is an agenda. It's hard for people to understand in the West because we're so far removed from a notion like that, that we have to take over the world or something. We come up with a religion or an ideology or whatever it may be that is global and needs to be enforced with force. But it exists. It existed under communism. It exists under this Islamism of the Muslim Brotherhood. And he's an adherent of that ideology. And we have to call him out on it and contest it.
What's scary is that the West is not immune to it. If you're looking at what has been happening in the UK or in France, you're seeing a direct attack against Western civilization and its values through the Muslim Brotherhood all over Europe.
Well, here's a complicated issue. I'm not sure that it's unidirected. I think it's falling perhaps on fertile ground, because I think if there's an absence of meaning, of belonging, of one's own identity, it's easier for foreign influence to come in and change society. And the West needs to regroup. The West needs to find itself. Its Judeo-Christian basis, its fundamentals. Who are we? The Jew gets up in the morning and the first thing he says is Modeh ani lefanecha. I am thankful before you, to God for bringing life back into me. And one of the great Hasidic masters says the first word is thank you, Modeh. The second word is ani. And he said the first thing you got to know is who you are. You say, I thank you. Who am I? Right? You need to have an identity. You need to be sure about who you are in order to be able to give thanks and gratitude and show appreciation and praise. So I think to a certain extent, there's a loss of identity in the West, and it's left itself open for these influences and really influence that attack its very being. So part of the issue is rewriting of history, is creating a narrative to serve a particular interest. And this, the United States and Israel shares. So in the United States, you had an effort to rewrite history and to say that the United States was born in sin. It's a white male narrative, the victor, the racist who founded the country on the basis of slavery and so on and so forth. So the dates change, the names change, the meaning changes. And we have the same thing in Israel. And it could be that it was actually borrowed from the attempt to change the narrative in Israel. It's not the Jewish people coming back to their ancestral homeland. It's what Edward Said said, that we are colonizers, interlopers. He used to say, the British left Nigeria, the French left Algeria, now the Jews have to leave Palestine. Well, there was Israel long before there was Palestine. And Palestine was a geographical descriptive term. It wasn't fundamental, it wasn't ideational. Israel was. And the idea that we are somehow strangers in our homeland is a rewriting of history. We're not colonizers. We're not interlopers. We've come home to our homeland. And we've actually been there all the time throughout the history. So the first thing we have to do in contesting this rewriting of history is to tell the truth. And the truth about history, the truth about meaning, the truth about who we are, the truth about our identity. So there's a lot in common there that our countries share.
I totally see that in America's education system. We stopped teaching civics. We have an American nation with amnesia. Even when we celebrate 4th of July, the vast majority of Americans don't even really know what Independence Day is about. And so I can certainly see that, and you create a vacuum, and other people just flock towards whatever it is whatever ism it is that they can find, and many of our adversaries are taking advantage of it. We can't talk about adversaries without mentioning Iran. So my first question is, do you think Israel would go after Iran even if the United States is not working in partnership with Israel?
Iran is a common enemy. Iran is not just an enemy of Israel. That's a mistake that many people make here. Iran calls Israel the little Satan and the United States the big Satan because of the values we share. And we're the canary in the coal mine. If Israel goes, they're coming for Western Europe and for the United States because, as I said before, this is an ideology, and this is the Shiite version of it, which needs to dominate the world. They're going to bring their caliphate around the world. This is a global agenda. So for us, it's existential now. We cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon because they say they're going to use it. And Marissa, there's so much Holocaust education and legislation and resolutions and trips and so on. And I think sometimes the main message of the Holocaust is missed. And that is that if someone says they're determined to kill you, believe them. Iran repeatedly says that we're a one-bomb country. So we don't have time for experiments. If they achieve a nuclear bomb, they're going to use it. And even before they use it, we have to understand that they're going to cause a nuclear arms race that's going to get completely blown out of proportion. If the Shiites have a nuclear bomb, the Sunnis have to have a nuclear bomb. And even beyond that, before they actually use it, all the proxies that they sponsor, the Houthis and the Hamas and the Hezbollah, they're all going to be operating under a nuclear umbrella, which means that we're going to go into a pattern of conventional wars that can never end. It'll be like a Vietnam situation. Israel can't afford a Vietnam situation. We're a small, tiny country. You said New Jersey, but the truth is, New Jersey's round. Israel is like a hot dog, not a hamburger. Now, we're only 40 miles wide with Judea and Samaria. We're 9 miles wide without Judea and Samaria. So it's very easy to cut us in half. And actually, the plan on October 7th, the ultimate plan, was not for an October 7th with Hamas exclusively penetrating our country. It was a ring of fire that Iran was trying to create, where Hezbollah, Lebanon, and Hezbollah, Iraq, and the Houthis and Hamas would all attack at once, would all penetrate the country at once, doing what they did in Be'eri and Nahal Oz and Nir Oz in the Gaza envelope, doing that in the north, right, to our 70,000 citizens in the north, and all throughout Judea and Samaria and the communities there. And at the same time, Iran was planning to fire ballistic missiles, so our reserves couldn't get called up, right? And that would be the ring of fire that would ultimately destroy Israel. Hamas preempted by not waiting for everyone else to join.
Why?
We're gonna figure that out when there's a national inquiry into the debacle of October 7th. Probably because Sinwar felt that he was ready. He saw that our intelligence wasn't at attention. There were intelligence briefs. He saw the intelligence briefs.
How?
Well, what they do is they test you. They send people to the fence and see what their reaction is. All right, they do all sorts of testing
like
of the Army's response. Well, kind of drills, but they're not really. They're just intended to see what the reaction is going to be and if we have our antennae up or not. And they saw that our antennae were down. There was a conception that the real danger was coming from the north and not from Hamas, and the Hamas wouldn't attack, and they'd only do it in the context of a broader ring of fire Iranian attack. And when intelligence saw that the Iranians were not attacking, they assumed that Hamas wouldn't do it either, because that was part of the master plan. And there was an absence of thinking out of the box. I mean, we have great intelligence successes. I mean, just look at the Beeper operation, right? It's beyond people's imagination. But we had an intelligence breakdown. It happens. It was a terrible breakdown, and we paid a very, very heavy price. But the point I want to make is that imagine that we had to confront that with an Iran with nuclear power, with nuclear weapons.
Well,
Everything would have changed.
Well, I also can't imagine any of Iran's adversaries living in the region living under the fear that Iran has a nuclear weapon. You would have a brain drain. People might leave. I mean, how hard would it be for people to live in a country knowing that at any point in time, Iran could just press a button?
An additional problem. But I mean, the existential issue, really, of living with a nuclear Iran is something we absolutely cannot permit to happen. So I think that we're absolutely on the same page with the administration on this. The president has been very clear that they cannot have a nuclear weapon. The special envoy, Steve Witkoff, just said in an interview, there cannot be any enrichment. And that's the key. I think what Steve pointed out was actually the most important point, because people get confused. They say, well, they can have enrichment for civilian purposes. You don't need enrichment for civilian purposes. There's 57 countries that have a civilian nuclear program. They don't have enrichment. They have fuel that they take in from elsewhere. It's processed and the fuel's removed, all under international inspection and scrutiny. So we have no problem if Iran wants to have a civilian nuclear program like the other 57 countries. But what they want is not that program. They want enrichment. So what we need is dismantlement of the infrastructure they've created. And I think we are absolutely in lockstep on this with the administration. So I think that the only deal that could be achieved with the Iranians is total dismantlement. If there's not going to be a deal on total dismantlement, we're going to have to do what we need to do to stay alive. And I think we've proven through these 77 years, we just celebrated our 77th anniversary. 70th anniversary in modern times. It's 3,700 years since Abraham came to the Promised Land. But we have proven that we'll do what it takes in order to ensure our survival. And in this case, there is no difference. We're going to do what it takes to ensure our survival.
What do you think the time frame is on something like this?
Well, they're very close to sprinting out to full enrichment. Mm-hmm. And once they have full enrichment, all they've got to do is take the full enrichment of uranium and pair it with weaponization. So they're moving very fast in weaponization. They're very close to full enrichment. They're very close to a nuclear bomb. Okay, whether it's a month or 2 months or 6 months, it's really irrelevant. That's where they're going, and that direction has to be stopped.
So you're saying it's pretty urgent?
Oh, we're urgent. I mean, the administration recognizes that. That's why there are talks right now. I mean, if you remember the president's letter, Marissa, he told them in 2 months this has to be concluded. So that's something that came from the White House. And we're more or less moving into that stage right now of either the talks are going to conclude with full dismantlement on the part of Iran, or the consequences are very clear. The president has said repeatedly. And I don't think that you can ask for anything clear on the part of an administration. This administration has absolutely been as clear as can be, crystal clear.
Ambassador, you mentioned October 7th, and honestly, I can't stop thinking about October 7th during this conversation. I think about the Bibas family. Many of us still don't know really what happened there. I don't know if you know more what happened there.
Oh, most unfortunately, we know what happened.
Tell me what happened with the Bibas family.
They were murdered. They were murdered in the most brutal fashion imaginable. And there was an attempt made to hide that fact.
For those of us who have not been following so closely, I remember on social media seeing that they returned the casket without the mother inside. Mm. They sent somebody else. Mm.
Whatever they can do to. I mean, look, this is a ghoulish operation. I mean, this is just an organization, a terrorist organization that is just horrific. I mean, the Nazis try to hide what they did. They try to hide their murderous annihilation of people. These people glorify it. Mm-hmm. And we often say that they hide behind non-combatants in Gaza. They don't just hide behind them. They celebrate their death. This is something that they can then sell to the West. See the Israelis, and everybody loses sight. I've said to people on the Hill, I said, what would you do if a neighboring country came across the border and slaughtered 1,200 Texans or 1,200 North Dakotans? What would you do? We have to defeat Hamas. We don't want to injure non-combatants. We don't want collateral damage. We're not interested in doing that. This is the biggest blood libel in history to say that Israel is guilty of genocide. This is a blood libel. This is like, the Middle Ages where they said that we take the blood of children and use it to bake matzahs on Passover. We don't do that. We don't do that. And we do everything we possibly can to avoid collateral damage. If we were guilty of war crimes, my son might be alive today. He went in by foot with his troops to go from house to house to find the shaft to the tunnel that was holding hostages. We didn't strafe bomb population centers. We go in with our troops to try to weed them out. But they need these non-combatant deaths in order to garner international support. And then they say to the world, see, big bad Israel. As a matter of fact, even under those circumstances, our numbers are better than the numbers of the American operation in Mosul, in which there were 4 non-combatants killed for every combatant. We're at a ratio of 1-to-1, 1-to-2. Every non-combatant killed is too much. But we're in a position where we have to fight this war and win. It is a tragedy, and we're doing everything we can to avoid collateral damage. And these accusations on the international stage to call our prime minister a war criminal? What is that? That's insane. And by the way, there's no way you can really fight anti-Semitism until you remove the stain of Cain from our prime minister. Because if you call the number 1 Jew in the world a war criminal, well, Jews are responsible. They're like their prime minister. They're war criminals, right? Jews who identify with Israel identify with a war criminal. So why shouldn't there be anti-Semitism?
Well, people are accusing Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu for prolonging the war against the Gazans in order to keep himself out of political trouble, out of going to jail for internal issues that they're having in Israel. These accusations are made not just by anti-Semites, they're also made by Israelis.
Political opposition sometimes is a horrible thing, but they go too far. There's nothing more malicious and malevolent than to level such charges at the prime minister. I know the prime minister for 40 years. He's a sensitive man who cares about people. Prolong a war? What kind of insanity is that? How they dare say something as malicious as that? He wants the war to end, but he wants the war to end in victory because he carries the weight of the Jewish people on his shoulders. As he said repeatedly in the most high-level meetings that he's had recently that I've been party to, he said, I carry the weight of my people on my shoulders. I have to protect them. He has a tremendous understanding of what existential dangers are, and he's doing everything he can to moderate this war and conduct this war in such a way that Israel wins, that Hamas is defeated, the hostages are released, and we protect ourselves from existential threats like the Iran nuclear weapon program.
Is the political opposition, I'm assuming the left in Israel, so focused on taking Bibi down that they don't?
It's the extreme left. The extreme left that has a lot of sway in certain areas of the media. The media loves to play on this, some of the media. It's the extremists. And there's nothing they won't do to bring Netanyahu down. And it's a calumny that needs to be called out. It is legitimate to oppose a government. I've opposed governments in my political career, and that's fine. But don't cross the border. Don't cross the line. Don't level blood libels against your own prime minister. There's a border to everything, and they've crossed it. And this has to stop. It doesn't even make any sense politically. Why would you want to prolong the war? The whole thing is just insane. To avoid, they say, the charges against him, right? So the charges against him are crumbling like a deck of cards.
What are the charges against him? I've been trying to follow it, but it's just like a slippery fish.
Very serious charges. Very, very serious charges. He accepted cigars People brought him some cigars. As a matter of fact, I work with the prime minister extensively. I know that if you want to bring him a gift, you bring him a book. Right? The latest bestseller is the real gift that he appreciates. But somebody brought him a cigar, or the charge is that he requested a newspaper to publish. Actually, it's an online newspaper to publish favorable articles. You'd have to put.
Is there any politician in the world that does not have a PR firm?
You'd have to put every politician in jail, for asking a media outlet to.
But what are the Ambassador? What are the real accusations? The real substantial ones.
Those are the real accusations. That's bribery. He passed legislation in order to get favorable ratings. It's crumbling one after another. The charges are crumbling like a deck of cards. They're sandcastles. They just built these sandcastles. And the idea was, here's the thing. The idea was to tire him to the point where he'd break. That was the idea. And he's not breaking.
He's like President Trump.
He's
it
not
just makes
breaking.
him stronger.
You asked about their relationship. There's something there. There's a connection between the two, even on that level. He is not breaking. And to a certain extent, yes, it makes him stronger, more defiant, and more confident. When you're right, and when you know that you have a clean slate, you don't have to crumble. You don't have to collapse. You don't tire. And just be confident in the justice of your own cause, your own convictions, and you just sail through and say, I have more important things to deal with. Could you imagine that he's being dragged to testimony in court as he's conducting a war, as he's conducting negotiations over the hostages, as he's planning operations? He was in court the week that he was planning the operation in Lebanon.
Over what accusation?
The accusations that we talked about. Well, it's the cigars. It's the connection with the media outlet, with some ridiculous. We ordered submarines from Germany, and why was it from Germany and not from elsewhere? And these are all trumped up charges, and they're.
It's causing a lot of damage internationally. I hope the Israelis know that, because for the anti-Semites and those who believe that Israel should not exist, they're taking real advantage of this narrative.
It is very painful. It's very painful, and it should stop.
Ambassador, what does long-term Gaza look like to you? And what does short-term Gaza look like?
It's hard for people to imagine something when circumstances haven't changed. Once the circumstance changed that Hamas is defeated, there are many vistas that will open up, many possibilities that will rise for Gaza. I don't know if it's going to be the Riviera of the Middle East, as the president has said, but it can be close to that. There's no reason in the world why, people talk about the Trump plan and say, well, why force the people out of Gaza? Nobody's forcing them out of Gaza. The only thing that's being forced right now is forcing them to stay in Gaza. So let's just allow them to leave.
Who's forcing them to stay in Gaza?
Egypt refuses to open the gates, right? We're allowing Palestinians out who want to go through our gates, through our country, for medical treatment or for family unification overseas. We don't have the capacity right now and the international embrace in order to allow hundreds of thousands to leave through Israel, but they could. Why isn't Egypt opening their gates and letting people through and letting them go elsewhere if they want to go?
Why? Why are the Egyptians not helping the Gazans?
This is the key question, Marissa, and the answer is that the Palestinians have been used for so many years as an instrument of demonizing Israel. The moment that narrative has to change because the Arabs of Gaza are choosing elsewhere, then we've disemboweled this narrative from those who want to demonize Israel. They can't use the Palestinians anymore as a whipping boy, right, against Israel. The occupation, so to speak, right? This is a narrative that's so embedded and it's been so embraced by our neighbors that they want to change it. So I think that's the main reason why they're very hesitant to change that narrative. But the fact of the matter is that that's why they're doing it. They're not letting them out. And they've said they're not going to let them out. So I think that what President Trump has said, let's just provide an option. And if they choose to stay under these circumstances, they can stay. But if they choose to leave for a particular period of time or permanently, these are very industrious people. If they're not dominated by a hostile terrorist group like Hamas, they'll be very industrious. They'll be a big plus to any country that's going to absorb them. But let's not force a situation where, I'll tell you an unbelievable story, okay? So we have, we've been petitioned many times by the Jordanian authorities to allow children out for medical treatment. So I got a call from some of the administration a few weeks ago that Jordan was not going to take the children because we were not assuring them that we'd let them back in once they leave. So I said, first of all, I assure you, I'm giving you my assurance that if they leave for treatment, Israel will allow them back in. But let me ask you a question. Do you really want the children to go back into a war zone? Is that the ask? If that's the ask of the administration, we'll do it. But ask the Jordanians if that's really what they want to do right now. And I didn't get a call back. Obviously, they don't want to. But if it's an opportunity to beat up on Israel in the media, let's not miss an opportunity.
So Israel just went back into Gaza, but also...
But we never really left.
And also opened up
moving.
more foreign aid just recently, correct?
Yeah. We're in a real existential dilemma here, because we've been putting humanitarian aid into Gaza consistently. Nobody has died of starvation. All these accusations are absolutely fallacious. There have been crises. It's a tenuous situation. But we have sent these semi-trailers into Gaza throughout the war. But it is a very problematic situation because Hamas immediately takes these semi-trailers, they hop on top of them with guns, masked with masks, and distribute it to who they want for sale. So you've got NGOs in the United States raising money for humanitarian aid and then financing Hamas. This is insanity. So if you have parents in Israel whose sons and daughters are going into Gaza to fight for the state, and then at the same time, we're also supplying food and aid to the Hamas that's shooting at our sons and daughters, that's an issue, right? That's a problem. It's a dilemma. Despite that dilemma, we've been doing it. Now we've created, together with mostly actually the United States, created a company comprised of ex-Green Berets who have been involved in U.S. aid, who have distributed humanitarian funding around the world, most recently in Haiti, who have formed a company that is going to be distributing the aid in Gaza. They're starting on May 24th with 4 installations, each one which will service 300,000 people. And the nice thing about this, Marissa, is that the food is going to be given directly to families, not to organizations, certainly not Hamas. And the protection for these installations is going to be provided by ex-Marines, ex-Navy, U.S. soldiers who have been hired by these companies and are being paid privately in order to provide protection. These are all private citizens. It's not the army involved. Mm-hmm. We are giving the protection of the periphery. We're providing peripheral security for these installations. And in this way, we'll be able to provide humanitarian aid directly to the citizens of Gaza without Hamas co-opting this humanitarian aid.
And you don't think that Hamas will start threatening the citizens of Gaza if they go up to these former Green Berets and get aid from them?
No, we don't think so. We don't think so because the people are tired of this. The people want change. We see on the ground more and more social media coming out of Gaza where the Gazans themselves are attacking the Hamas and saying, we've had enough of this. Yeah. They've also been demonstrating in the streets against Hamas.
Wow.
And that's a big development.
We see demonstrations in colleges and in Western countries, but we don't see these demonstrations here in the United States of Gazans against Hamas.
These demonstrations that we've seen here on campuses, it's really mind-boggling. If we're talking about genocide and war crimes, what they're advocating is genocide. From the river to the sea. What does from the river to the sea mean? It means there's no Israel. It means the eradication of the state of Israel. That's genocide.
A question, Ambassador. So I looked up Israel's GDP from last year. It was $540 billion. That's about the GDP of Colorado, about, I would say, 14th or 15th if Israel was one of the states in the United States. That's a lot. It's a lot of money. Do you think Israel still needs foreign aid from America? Does Israel even want foreign aid from America, given that foreign aid usually does come with strings attached?
First of all, we're not Colorado. We're in a rougher neighborhood than Colorado is. Number two, we don't have foreign aid. We have military assistance. We've weaned ourselves from foreign aid a while ago. So there's military assistance. And the military assistance is assistance that goes around. What goes around comes around. We provide tremendous military assets for the United States because of that military aid. Most of the munitions we purchase are purchased here, providing jobs for Americans. But we also test American products. There's no Army, no Air Force in the world that has as many flying hours as in the F-35s as we do. So there's a lot of benefit the United States gets from the military aid to Israel. But I will tell you that over time, we can wean ourselves from the majority of that as well if the United States is interested in doing so. We're an independent country. We do quite well. And indeed, the nature of the relationship has changed over time, like between two people. I mean, we change over time. And if we're not aware of our own changes and the changes in our colleagues, spouses, interlocutors, then we're going to be less successful in life. The more we're aware of our own metamorphoses and that of our friends, the more successful we are. So it's the same way in international relations. We have to be aware of the social changes, civil changes, changes between countries that are taking place, and operate accordingly. So I think we're doing that, and I think that we could reach a state where the nature of the assistance that we give each other might change, but we don't have to hurry too fast and get that done.
That's interesting. As I think through it and the way you describe it, it's as if Israel is America's military guinea pig, keeping America's military industry from going stale.
We're not an exclusive guinea pig, but we do play that role as well. There's certainly an aspect of that there. And I'd even talk about the intel we share. I mean, there's an extensive relationship in intelligence gathering, which is of acute importance to the United States security.
So you're a biblical scholar, and I can't help but think sometimes when I watch what is happening in the world right now, very hard to just reckon with. Is some of this just above us, a spiritual warfare between good and evil, an ongoing story of humankind, Israel somehow continuing to be the center of it? Do you ever think about that in those terms?
Do I ever think about it? I think about it all the time, particularly after my son was killed, and have to ask, what at the end of the day he was fighting for? Was it just the security of Israel? And I think that, which is no small matter, I think the security of Israel is a big deal. And I'm very, very proud of him and his colleagues, his fellow soldiers who have given their lives. Got all my other kids who are still in reserve duty and fighting despite the fact they lost their older brother. But I do think he was fighting in something much bigger than our security. I think really it's the security of civilization. I think it's a civilizational battle that we're fighting against barbarism. I think October 7th showed us that the barbarism is at the gate. The barbarians are at the gate. And if we don't contest them, they're going to plow through, and we will not be the only victims. We're always the canary in the coal mine. Jews are the canaries in the coal mine. And if they come after us and they're successful, it's not going to end there. So I think that we underestimate the power of ideas that stand behind the actions of international actors, states, and organizations. And I think we're in a battle for, as you said, not only good and evil, but vis-a-vis the West, we're also in a battle which claims that there is such a thing as evil. You know, we're in a post, perhaps we're at the end of a postmodern era in which it wasn't that they said that there's no that this is evil, or they confuse good and evil, but they actually said there's no such thing as objective evil.
And there's
no
no truth.
such thing as objective truth. And I think what Israel's battle at the end of the day is similar to an Abrahamic kind of battle, who stood up in a world and said that man doesn't create God, God creates man. It was a revolutionary idea. I think we're standing up today in the world saying to a postmodern message that says that there is no such thing as objectivity, and we're saying, yes, there is such a thing as objective truth. And stating, for example, that we are indigenous to the land of Israel, that's part of the objective truth. Was there a history that was not written by just the victors? We weren't the victors, right? Can you possibly condemn us for creating the narrative? We weren't the victors. We were the victims. But the key to our success is that we never accepted victimhood. That's the essence of Jewish existence. We did not accept victimhood. You talk about the Bible, Marissa. So here we have a situation where God comes to Moses and says, go back to Egypt and say, let my people go. And Moses said, I can't do that. I have an impediment. I have a speech impediment. I'm an invalid. I'm disabled. And God basically tells him, get over it, right? And from that moment, we've been Mosaic in the sense that we've had to get over it. We don't wallow in our own pity and sorrow. We get over it. When my son was killed, I said to myself, I either have to choose self-pity or live for him. And by living for him, I put him on my shoulders, and I get up in the morning and I say, this is what he'd want me to do. And that's what we did. That's what we did after the Holocaust. That's what we did after we lost a third of our people. How are we going to turn this around? Remember the little boy in the Warsaw Ghetto? Remember with his hands up against the Nazi rifles and his sunken eyes of despair? What the state of Israel did was say to that little boy in the Warsaw Ghetto, put your hands down, take a weapon in hand, and fight for your survival. If the state of Israel didn't come into being after the Holocaust, so what would have been etched into our hearts is that little boy in the Warsaw Ghetto. That's in museums and in textbooks on the Holocaust, not on our hearts. Why? Because the state of Israel came into being and said, Jews, live. And we said to the world, don't accept victimhood. Go on living. Fight Nazism. Fight evil. That's what we're doing today. We're fighting evil.
You mentioned earlier in this conversation a morning prayer. There is a piece of Birkot HaShachar about a rooster. And as a child, I never understood why we're singing about a rooster. But the chant about the rooster is that the rooster has discernment and is able to tell between darkness and light. And you wake up every morning when you say this Jewish prayer and you thank God for giving you discernment to know when there is darkness and there is light. And I can't help but think about this particular prayer as you describe what is happening in the world right now, because we are raising children without discernment when we create this blur of truth, this blur of what is a man, what is a woman, what is good, what is evil. This entire blur, this entire chaos is one of the most ungodly things that we could do, and probably very much so why we're seeing so much destruction and demonic behavior on our planet.
I think you're so insightful, Marissa, when you talk about discernment. And as long as we're on the subject of the Bible and the morning prayer, let's think about it. What's being created in the image of God? So what does God do? In creation, he discerns. He discerns between heaven and earth. He discerns between inanimate objects. He discerns between the 6th day of the week and the 7th day of the week. And then he tells us, discern between the tree of life and all the other trees. And what's our mistake? We don't discern. We eat from the tree of life. We say it's just like all the other trees. That's being a human in the image of God. Discernment. What postmodernism came and did was rip our souls from the ability to discern and said there's no need to discern. Blurred the lines, yeah, absolutely, between everything, but mostly on a value plane. We've just said that there's no such thing as absolute values. We've got to go back to that. And I think that's very much what we're doing. I think some of the hatred for our prime minister is because he represents a return to values. And I think that much of the influence of the postmodernists is to despise someone who represents fundamentals of, yes, there are objective truth, there's objective morality. We're representing them. I think when he says that we're representing the fight against barbarism, that riles postmodern thinking. And because he's at the forefront of that battle, he's hated for that. But he's also loved. He's also loved by the people who want very much to see a return to some basic values and want to see us win this war, which is on both those planes, the practical security plane, on the ideational plane. And we're going to win this thing because we've done this for now 3,700 years. So we're going to win this battle. We have so many friends in Washington. We have so many friends in the administration. We have so many friends throughout American society. We have so many friends here in PragerU. So I think it's going to be a challenge. We're in the middle of, people say, how does Israel deal with PTSD? Well, we're not P yet. We're not post. We're still in war. We're still in battle.
And then you'll deal with it with resilience.
We will. We'll deal with it with resilience. Thank you so much.
Ambassador, thank you for coming in. Next time you come in, we'll have to talk about the Hebrew Bible and its impact on influence on John Locke and later on the American Constitution.
Absolutely. I'd love to do that. It's a riveting conversation.
Yeah.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. All right. Likewise. Thanks again.
Thank you, Marissa.